He saved 2 sisters from raging waters. What happened next changed 3 lives. Forever the twin sons of New Horizon Colony were already fading when the storm sirens began to cry. Their long, rising wail rolled over the dry plains and into the canyons like a warning from the sky itself. Most storms here were sharp and quick, dust, lightning, hard wind. But this one felt different. The air turned cold, heavy, and strange, as if the planet had taken a slow breath and was about to shout. Elias Kane heard the sirens from miles away. He was riding alone, as he usually did, moving along the edge of Copperline Canyon with his hat pulled low and his coat sealed at the collar. His mount wasn't a normal horse. On New Horizon, animals were rare and expensive, so most ranchers used biomech rides, part living muscle, part smart metal. Elias was named Rust. It walked steady even when the ground shook and its eyes could scan heat signatures in the dark. Elias lived out on the frontier, where the colony shields did not reach. He chose it that way. The open land gave him room to think, and the quiet kept old memories from finding him too easily. He was a cowboy in the old style, simple gear, steady hands, and a calm that didn't break under pressure. But he was also something else. Once he had flown ranger patrols across these skies, chasing smugglers and rescue signals. He stopped after one mission went wrong. People in town didn't ask about it much, and he didn't offer answers. Rust's visor link flashed a warning in the corner of Elias' sight. Flash flood risk, severe. Far below, the river that usually ran thin and quiet was already swelling. It flashed silver under the last light, and foam began to collect in ugly knots along the rocks. He should head home. That would be the smart choice. But then he heard something that didn't belong in the wind. Voices. Not the sirens, not the storm. Human voices, sharp with panic. Elias turned Rust toward the sound and pushed into a gallop. The path narrowed as it followed the canyon rim. Alien brush snapped against his boots, leaving a bitter scent in the air. Lightning cracked in the distance, blue-white and too close. Rain began as hard needles that struck his hat and shoulders, then thickened into sheets that blurred the world. The voices grew louder. When Elias reached a bend in the trail, he saw the broken bridge. It was an old colony structure made of reinforced composite, built years ago when the settlement first expanded. It crossed the canyon where the river bent tight and fast. Now it sagged like a snapped spine, half its support beams twisted and dangling. A transport wagon lay crushed against the far side, pinned by debris. Its lights flickered weakly through the rain, and clinging to the remains of the bridge were 2 figures. 2 young women, soaked, shaking, trapped above the raging water. One was taller, her dark hair plastered to her face, one arm wrapped around a broken rail. Her other hand gripped the wrist of the second girl, who looked younger and smaller. The younger one's head hung low, and her feet kicked wildly every time a surge of wind or water jolted the bridge. Elias' heart tightened. The river roared beneath them, swollen and furious. It carried branches, broken crates, and pieces of metal from somewhere upstream. Every few seconds, a wave slammed against the bridge supports, making the whole structure tremble. The taller sister looked up and saw Elias. "Help!" she shouted, her voice tearing through the storm. "Please!" Elias didn't waste words. He rode to the nearest stable ground and jumped off Rust. His boots sank into mud. He reached into his saddle pack and pulled out a compact grappling launcher, standard frontier gear, useful for hauling fences or climbing cliffs. He anchored the line around a thick rock spur and tested the tension. The cable hummed, strong and steady. Rain streamed down his face, cold as melted ice. "Hold on," he called. "Don't move unless I tell you." The taller sister nodded hard. Even from here, Elias could see her jaw clenched tight, forcing her fear down. She was trying to stay strong for the younger one. Elias clipped the cable harness around his waist and stepped carefully onto what remained of the bridge. The composite surface was slick. The wind shoved at him like an invisible hand. He lowered his body and moved on hands and knees, keeping his weight spread out. Under him, the bridge creaked and groaned. A few feet away, a support beam snapped with a sharp crack and fell into the river like a thrown spear. The younger sister let out a thin sound, not quite a scream, more like a breath that broke. "It's okay," Elias said, keeping his voice calm. "Look at me, you're going to be okay." He reached the girls. Up close, he saw the younger one's hands were raw and bleeding from gripping metal too hard. Her lips were pale. Her eyes looked unfocused, like she was slipping away from the moment. Elias looked at the taller sister. "Can you keep holding the rail?" Yes, she said quickly, but her voice shook. Just take her first. That told Elias everything. The older one was scared, but her mind was clear. She had made a choice already, save her sister even if she fell. Elias crouched and secured the younger sister into his harness with practiced movements. Loop, clip, lock. He checked the seals twice. "What's your name?" he asked the younger one, not because he needed it, but because names kept people awake. "Lyra," she whispered. "All right, Lyra, I'm Elias. I'm going to pull you back to the rim. Stay still. Let the cable do the work." He signaled Rust with a hand motion. Rust's system connected to the launcher anchor and engaged the pull-assist motor. The cable tightened and Elias guided Lyra's weight toward the stable side of the bridge. The river surged again. Spray slapped them, cold and stinging. The bridge shuddered. Elias pushed Lyra out first, then crawled after her, using the cable tension like a lifeline. Step by step, he got her back to solid ground. Rust braced itself and helped keep the pull steady. The moment Lyra's boots touched the earth, her legs collapsed. Elias caught her before she fell fully. She trembled violently, teeth chattering, eyes wide with shock. Elias wrapped a thermal blanket around her shoulders and turned her gently toward Rust. "Sit," he told her. "Breathe slow." Lyra obeyed, clutching the blanket like it was the only warm thing in the universe. Elias didn't pause to rest. He turned back toward the bridge. The taller sister was still there, still holding on, but barely. Her arms shook. Her grip had slipped lower. The broken rail dug into her palm. Blood mixed with rain and ran down her wrist. "Okay," Elias shouted over the roar. "I'm coming back, don't look down." She gave a tight nod. Elias crawled onto the bridge again. The structure was worse now. Debris had slammed into it and one section had torn loose. The air smelled of burned metal, as if something electrical had shorted out nearby. When Elias reached her, he saw her eyes were fierce, but tears ran down her face anyway. "I wasn't going to let go," she said through shaking breath. "Not while she—" "I know," Elias cut in, soft but firm. "You did good." He clipped her into the harness. The cable groaned as it took her weight. Elias kept one hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "Name?" he asked. "Mara," she said. "All right, Mara, same as before. Stay still. Trust the line." As they started back, the bridge gave a sound like a deep, slow sigh. Elias felt it through his knees. The whole thing shifted. He looked back once and saw the broken support beam finally tearing free. "Move!" he shouted. He shoved Mara forward, pushing her weight into the cable pull, and scrambled after her. The cable tightened hard, yanking both of them toward safety. Behind them, the bridge collapsed. It didn't fall all at once. It snapped in sections, first the middle, then the far end. Composite panels shattered and spun into the air before crashing into the river. A chunk of railing clipped Elias' boot, nearly knocking him off balance. He didn't let go. The cable dragged them over the last edge, and Rust braced again, hooves digging into wet ground. Elias and Mara hit the mud hard. For a second, all three of them, Elias, Mara, and Lyra, just stayed there, breathing, listening to the river chew up the bridge like it was nothing. Mara rolled onto her back, staring up into the storm. We were on that." Elias unhooked her harness. "Not anymore." Mara sat up fast, crawling toward Lyra. She pulled her sister into a tight hug, and Lyra finally let out a sob she'd been holding back. Myra's shoulders shook as well, but she kept her arms firm around Lyra, like she could block the whole storm with her body. Elias stood and scanned the area. His visor showed faint heat signatures far upriver, moving shapes, not animals. Maybe people, maybe salvage riders, maybe trouble. He didn't like the timing. "Can you stand?" he asked. Mara nodded. "Yes." "I can." She helped Lyra up, keeping her close. Elias whistled for Rust, then led them toward the trail that climbed away from the canyon. Rain poured harder, turning the path into a slick ribbon. "My wagon," Mara said, looking back once. "Everything we had." Elias didn't soften the truth. "It's gone." Mara closed her eyes briefly, swallowing hard. Then she opened them and looked at him with a strange mix of pain and stubborn gratitude. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "You could have ridden past." Elias adjusted the blanket around Lyra's shoulders and kept walking. "I saw you. That makes it hard to ride past." The three moved into the storm together, leaving the broken bridge behind. None of them knew yet that the flood was not an accident. And none of them could guess that saving two sisters from raging waters would pull Elias Kane back into a fight he tried to escape, one that would test his courage, their trust, and the future of the whole frontier. But for now, the only thing that mattered was getting them to shelter before the river rose again. Elias pointed toward the distant lights of his ranch on the high ridge. "My place is that way," he said. "It's not fancy, but it's safe." Mara tightened her grip on Lyra's hand. Lyra looked up at Elias, still shaking, but something like hope flickered in her eyes. "Okay," Mara said quietly. "We'll go." And as the storm raged behind them, three lives, separate and broken in different ways, began to move toward the same horizon. The storm did not end quickly. Rain followed Elias, Mara, and Lyra all the way up the ridge path. The sky stayed dark, flashing with distant lightning that turned the alien plains into silver shadows for brief moments. The wind pushed against them, making every step feel heavy. Elias walked slightly ahead, guiding the way. Rust moved beside Lyra, lowering its head now and then as if checking her condition. The biomechanical horse's soft, internal lights glowed through the rain, creating a small circle of comfort in the storm. Mara stayed close to her sister, one arm around Lyra's shoulders. She was exhausted, but her eyes stayed alert. Every sound made her glance back toward the canyon. Losing their wagon meant losing almost everything they owned. Still, she kept moving forward because stopping meant danger. After nearly an hour, they reached the ranch. It sat on high ground, surrounded by wide fences and tall signal posts. The house itself was simple, metal walls reinforced with old wooden panels, a wide porch, and solar panels angled toward the sky. Lights turned on automatically as they approached, warm and steady. Lyra let out a small breath of relief. "It's safe," Elias said quietly, opening the main door. Warm air rushed out to meet them. Inside, the ranch smelled of clean metal, dry hay, and something cooking slowly in a corner unit. Mara hesitated at the doorway for a moment. It felt strange stepping into a stranger's home after everything that had happened, but Elias stepped aside, giving them space instead of pressure. "You can stay until the storm passes," he said simply. They entered. Inside was neat and practical. Tools hung on one wall, and maps of the surrounding land covered another. A long wooden table stood near the center, worn from years of use. It felt like a place built by someone who valued function more than decoration. Elias handed them dry towels and guided them toward a heating unit. Lyra sank into a chair, holding her hands close to the warmth. Color slowly returned to her face. Mara watched Elias quietly as he moved around the room, preparing hot drinks and activating a drying cycle for their wet clothes. He worked without making a big show of helping, which somehow made the kindness feel more real. "You live here alone?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. No explanation followed. Mara didn't push. After they changed into spare clothes Elias provided, the three sat around the table. The storm battered the roof, but inside everything felt calm. Lyra wrapped her hands around a warm cup. "Thank you," she said softly. Elias nodded once. Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains. After a while, Mara spoke again. "We were heading to Ironfield Settlement. Someone told us there was work there, farming, repairs, anything." "What happened to your last place?" Elias asked. Mara hesitated. Her eyes moved briefly toward Lyra before she answered. "Flooding, but it felt wrong. Systems failed all at once. Warning towers didn't activate." Elias leaned back slightly, listening carefully. "Sabotage?" he asked. "Maybe," Mara said. "I used to work in infrastructure engineering. When systems fail naturally, there are patterns. This felt planned." Elias' expression didn't change much, but inside something shifted. The storm tonight had also arrived too suddenly, too violently. Before he could respond, a loud crack sounded outside. The lights flickered. Elias stood immediately. "Stay here." He grabbed a jacket and stepped onto the porch. Rain hit him instantly. He scanned the perimeter through his visor. One of the outer signal towers sparked and went dark. Lightning had struck nearby. He walked quickly toward the tower, boots sinking into mud. The system wasn't completely destroyed, just overloaded. He opened the panel and reset the circuits with practiced hands. As he worked, he noticed something unusual, a small drone lying half-hidden near the fence line. Its design didn't match standard colony equipment. Elias picked it up. Its casing was damaged, but faint lights blinked weakly. He carried it inside. "What is that?" Lyra asked, curiosity breaking through her tiredness. "Not sure yet," Elias replied. He placed the drone on the table and scanned it with a handheld tool. Data lines appeared on his wrist display: corporate mining model, unauthorized flight path, surveillance logs. Mara leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "This isn't civilian tech." No, Elias agreed. He opened one of the memory files. A map projection appeared showing the river system and several points marked along it. Explosive charge placements. Mara's breath caught. They caused the flooding. The realization hung heavy in the room. Why? Lyra asked. Elias answered quietly. To force people off the land. If settlements become unsafe, corporations can claim emergency control. Mara clenched her fists. Our home wasn't an accident. Anger flashed across her face, mixed with grief. Before anyone could speak again, motion sensors outside beeped. 3 heat signatures approached from the south. Elias' posture changed instantly, calm but alert. Stay behind me, he said. He walked to the window and watched as riders appeared through the rain, figures on mechanical mounts, lights scanning the ranch. Lyra whispered, Are they looking for us? Maybe, Elias said. Maybe for the drone. A voice crackled through an external speaker. Frontier Rancher, it said. We're conducting a storm safety check. Open your gate. The tone felt wrong, too formal, too controlled. Elias stepped outside again, closing the door behind him so the sisters couldn't hear everything clearly. What do you want? He asked. Just routine inspection, the voice replied. Elias crossed his arms. Storm safety checks don't usually come with surveillance drones. A brief pause followed. We advise cooperation, the voice said, colder now. Elias stayed still. Rain slid off the brim of his hat. This is private land, he said calmly. Come back with proper authority. The riders exchanged looks. For a moment, tension hung heavy in the air. Finally, one of them turned their mount away. The others followed. Without another word, they disappeared into the storm. Elias watched until their heat signatures faded completely. When he returned inside, Mara stood waiting. They weren't just checking safety, were they? No, he said. They're connected to whoever caused the flooding. Lyra looked nervous. Are we in danger? Elias thought for a moment. He could send them away at first light, let them continue toward Ironfield and keep his distance from whatever was coming. But when he looked at the sisters, tired, brave, already carrying too much loss, he knew that wasn't the right choice. Yes, he said honestly, there might be danger. Mara nodded slowly. Then we don't run. Something about her determination made Elias respect her instantly. Good, he said quietly. Because neither do I outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the ranch something new began to form, not just shelter, but trust. 3 strangers who had met by chance now faced a shared threat. And none of them yet realized how deeply their lives were about to change. Morning came slowly to New Horizon Colony. The storm had weakened, but the sky still held heavy clouds that moved like slow gray waves across the horizon. Rain fell lightly now, tapping against the ranch roof in a steady rhythm. The land looked different after the flood. Fresh lines carved into the soil, broken branches scattered across the fields, and the distant river shining whiter than before. Elias stood on the porch, watching the plains through narrowed eyes. He held a warm mug in one hand, though he had forgotten to drink it. His thoughts stayed fixed on the riders from the night before and the drone lying on the table inside. Behind him, the ranch door opened. Mara stepped out, wrapped in one of Elias' spare coats. Her hair was tied back loosely, and despite the tiredness in her face, she looked stronger than she had the night before. You didn't sleep much, she said quietly. Elias shrugged slightly. Storms make people restless. Mara leaned against the porch railing, looking out at the land. You think they'll come back? Yes, he answered without hesitation. She nodded as if she had expected that. Inside, Lyra moved around slowly, exploring the ranch kitchen with careful curiosity. She looked better after resting, though she still held the blanket around her shoulders. She had already started helping, cleaning dishes and organizing small things, unable to sit still for long. The ranch felt different now. For years it had been silent, filled only with Elias' routines. Now it held voices, movement, warmth. Elias noticed it without fully admitting it to himself. After breakfast, Elias gathered tools and walked toward the outer fence line. Mara followed. I can help, she said. He handed her a repair kit without argument. Together, they worked on damaged sections of the fence and checked sensor posts. Mara moved confidently around the equipment, confirming what she had said before. She understood engineering systems well. You weren't just guessing about sabotage, Elias said. No, she replied. I used to work for a company that built colony infrastructure. I left when I realized how little they cared about settlers. Profit first, safety later. Elias gave a quiet hum of understanding. As they worked, Lyra approached, with Rust walking beside her. She carried a small tablet. "I checked the drone again," she said. "There's more data hidden in it." Elias wiped his hands and took the tablet. A map appeared showing multiple flood control points across the region. Red markers blinked steadily. "They place charges along the river system," Mara said, leaning closer. "Not just here. If they activate the rest." "More flooding," Elias finished. Lyra's eyes widened. "People could die." Silence fell over them. Elias felt the familiar weight of responsibility pressing on his chest, the same feeling he had known during his ranger days. He had tried to leave that life behind, but trouble had followed him anyway. "We need proof," Mara said. "If we show the colony council, they'll have to act." Elias nodded slowly. "Then we gather it." The decision changed the air around them. The rest of the day turned into preparation. Elias opened storage areas filled with old ranger equipment, scanners, field shields, and a compact rover vehicle. Mara helped upgrade the sensors, improving their ability to detect hidden explosives. Lyra organized supplies and checked communication lines. Working together felt natural, as if they had known each other longer than a few days. During a quiet moment, Lyra looked at Elias. "You used to be a ranger, didn't you?" Elias paused. "Yes." "What happened?" He hesitated, then spoke carefully. "A rescue mission went wrong. Someone trusted me to get them home, and I failed." Lyra didn't ask for details. She simply nodded and said, "You didn't fail us." The words stayed with him long after she walked away. By late afternoon, they were ready to leave. The storm clouds broke slightly, letting pale sunlight reach the plains. Elias guided the rover toward the canyon system where the flood control facility stood. The drive was quiet but focused. As they approached the facility, Elias slowed the rover and activated stealth mode. The building looked damaged from the storm, but power lights still blinked along its surface. "Someone's here," Mara said, pointing to fresh tracks in the mud. Elias parked behind a ridge. "We go in quiet." They moved carefully toward the structure. The air smelled of wet metal and river water. Inside, broken panels hung from the walls, and water dripped steadily from the ceiling. Lyra stayed near the entrance while Elias and Mara advanced deeper. They found the control room partially intact. Screens displayed system logs showing manual overrides, clear evidence of interference. Mara began downloading data quickly. Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Elias motioned for silence. Two corporate agents entered the room, speaking in low voices. "Charges are still stable," one said. "Once the final authorization comes, we trigger Phase 2. Elias exchanged a glance with Mara. Confirmation. The agents noticed movement. "Who's there?" one demanded. Elias stepped forward calmly. "Someone who doesn't like what you're doing." The tension exploded instantly. One agent reached for a weapon, but Elias moved faster, disarming him with precise movements. Mara used a nearby tool to block the second agent, forcing him back. Within seconds, both were restrained. Lyra rushed in, eyes wide but determined. "We need to leave," she said. "More vehicles are coming." Mara grabbed the data drive. "We have proof." They ran back to the rover as distant engines echoed through the canyon. The chase began immediately. Corporate riders followed, their mounts kicking up mud and water. Elias drove with steady control, guiding the rover through narrow paths only a local would know. Lyra watched the rear display, calling out directions. "They're gaining." Elias turned sharply into a hidden canyon pass. The rover bounced hard over rocks, but he didn't slow down. Finally, after several tense minutes, the pursuing riders lost sight of them. They drove until the ranch appeared on the horizon. Only when they reached safety did anyone breathe fully again. Inside the ranch, Mara uploaded the data to a secure transmission line. The colony council received the files within minutes. "They can't ignore this," she said. Elias watched the sisters, tired, brave, alive. Something inside him shifted again. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone facing danger. Outside, the clouds slowly parted, revealing a thin strip of clear sky. But even as hope grew, Elias knew this wasn't over yet. The people behind the sabotage wouldn't give up easily, and the next battle would decide not only the future of the land, but the future of the bond forming between three lives brought together by raging waters. The sky above New Horizon Colony finally cleared after days of storms. Morning sunlight stretched across the plains, turning wet ground into shining silver patches. The river flowed wide but calmer now, its anger replaced by steady movement. From the porch of the ranch, Elias watched the horizon carefully, as he always did, but something inside him felt different. He was not alone anymore. Inside the house, Mara stood near the communication console, reviewing messages from the colony council. Lyra sat at the table, eating slowly but with more energy than before. The ranch felt alive with quiet activity. They received all the evidence, Mara said, turning toward Elias. The council is opening a full investigation. Corporate access to the river systems has been suspended. Elias nodded once. It was good news, but he knew it didn't mean the danger had ended. They won't give up easily, he said. Mara agreed. People like that never do. Lyra looked between them. But at least now the truth is out. A soft silence followed. For the first time since arriving, Lyra smiled fully. The fear that had lived behind her eyes since the flood seemed lighter now. Later that day, Elias began repairing storm damage across the ranch. Mara joined him without being asked, adjusting sensors and checking energy lines. Lyra helped inside, preparing supplies and organizing tools. Working together had become natural. There were no awkward moments anymore, only shared purpose. As the sun moved higher, a distant hum echoed across the plains. Elias looked up immediately. A transport ship approached, moving slowly toward the ranch. Its markings matched the colony council. "They're here," Mara said. The ship landed near the outer field, kicking up dust. Two officials stepped out, dressed in formal coats that looked out of place on the rugged land. They spoke with Elias privately at first, thanking him for exposing the sabotage. The data gathered by the three of them had already led to multiple arrests across the region. Flood systems were being secured and settlers were being warned about hidden dangers. "You saved lives," one official said. Elias shifted slightly, uncomfortable with praise. "We just did what was needed," the official smiled faintly. "Still, the council wants to offer you a position again. Ranger status reinstated. Full authority." The words hung in the air. Mara watched from a distance, her expression thoughtful. Lyra stood beside her, curious. For a moment, Elias imagined returning to his old life, flying patrol routes, chasing criminals, always moving. It had once been everything he knew. But then he looked toward the ranch, toward the home that no longer felt empty. Toward the sisters who had turned silence into warmth. "No," he said finally, "I'm staying here." The officials seemed surprised but respectful. After more discussion, they departed, leaving the ranch quiet again. Mara approached slowly. "You turned them down?" "Yes." "Why?" Elias thought carefully before answering. "I spent years running from one mission to another. I forgot what it felt like to belong somewhere. I think I want to build something instead of just chasing problems." Mara smiled softly. That evening they sat outside as the sky turned orange and purple. The air felt fresh after the storm, carrying the scent of wet earth. Lyra spoke first. "What happens now?" Elias leaned back in his chair. "That's up to all of us." Mara hesitated. "We should probably leave soon." "Ironfield settlement still needs workers. We can't stay forever." The words felt heavy. Elias stared at the horizon for a long moment before speaking. "You don't have to leave." Mara looked surprised. "We've already taken so much from you." "You haven't taken anything," he said calmly. "You helped save this land, and the ranch could use more than one pair of hands." Lyra's face lit up slightly. "You mean stay here?" "If you want," Elias said simply. Mara looked down, thinking deeply. She had spent years surviving, never staying in one place long enough to feel safe. The idea of choosing to stay somewhere felt both comforting and frightening. "What if we slow you down?" she asked quietly. Elias shook his head. "You've made things stronger, not slower." Silence settled between them again, but this time it felt warm. Days passed. The ranch changed slowly as they worked together. Mara redesigned parts of the irrigation system, making it stronger against future sabotage. Lyra planted new crops near the fence line, laughing whenever rust followed her too closely. Elias found himself smiling more than he had in years. Neighbors began visiting again, bringing supplies and stories. Word of the flood rescue spread quietly through the colony. People respected Elias even more now, but he avoided attention, preferring simple conversations and shared meals. One afternoon, while repairing a gate, Elias watched Mara working nearby. She moved with confidence, no longer carrying the same guarded tension he had seen when they first met. She noticed him watching and raised an eyebrow. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," he said, though a small smile touched his face. Lyra ran toward them suddenly, waving a tablet. The council just sent another message. They're opening a new support station near the river. They want help designing it. Mara laughed softly. That sounds like real work. Elias nodded. Then we help. As sunset arrived, the three stood together on the ridge overlooking the plains. The river flowed peacefully below, almost impossible to imagine how dangerous it had been only days before. The broken bridge was gone now, washed away completely. But something new had taken its place, not in the physical world but between them. Trust, connection, a shared future. Mara turned toward Elias. You know, if you hadn't stopped that day, if you had just ridden past, he shook his head gently. I couldn't, Lyra smiled. Good thing you didn't. They stood quietly, watching the sky change colors. Three lives that had once moved in separate directions now followed the same path. The rescue from raging waters had not just saved two sisters. It had given Elias a reason to open his heart again, given Mara a place where she could finally stop running, and given Lyra a home filled with hope. The future of New Horizon Colony remained uncertain. Challenges would come again, storms would return, and new dangers would rise. But this time they would face it together. And as the stars appeared one by one above the peaceful plains, the ranch that had once been a lonely outpost became something more. A beginning shaped by courage, trust, and the simple choice to stand beside each other when it mattered most.